The town I moved to isn't on any map, and I can't leave. The real estate listing had been vague, almost dreamlike, secluded cottage nestled in the heart of the Whispering Pines. Tranquility guaranteed. For Amelia, 37 and seeking an escape from the relentless pace of city life, it sounded perfect. The price was unbelievably low, a steal, but she'd chalked it up to the remoteness of the location. She hadn't been able to find the town, Havenwood, on any map, but the agent had assured her it was a charming, close-knit community, just a short drive from the main highway. The drive had been longer than expected, the winding roads eventually giving way to a narrow, overgrown lane that seemed to disappear into the dense pine forest. Finally, nestled in a small clearing, she found the cottage. It was even more idyllic than the listing suggested, with moss-covered stone walls, a thatched roof, and a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney. The town of Havenwood was a short walk from the cottage, a cluster of quaint houses gathered around a central square. It looked like a picture postcard, with cobblestone streets, flower-filled window boxes, and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. The people she encountered were friendly, offering warm smiles and nods as she passed. There was a timeless quality to the place, a sense of peace that settled over Amelia like a comforting blanket. She spent her first few weeks exploring Havenwood, charmed by its simplicity and the genuine warmth of its inhabitants. There was a general store that seemed to stock everything, a bakery with the most delicious bread she had ever tasted, and a small library filled with well-worn books. She met a few of the locals, Mrs. Gable, who ran the bakery and always had a kind word, Mr. Abernathy, the quiet librarian with a twinkle in his eye, and a young man named Daniel, who helped out at the general store and seemed eager to show her around. As the initial enchantment began to settle into a comfortable routine, Amelia decided to venture out, to explore the surrounding area. The agent had mentioned a larger town about an hour's drive away, where she could find more amenities. She got in her car, a reliable old sedan, and followed the winding road out of Havenwood, the dense pines lining the route. After driving for what felt like much longer than an hour, she started to feel a prickle of unease. She hadn't seen a single signpost, no indication of distance or direction. The road seemed to loop and curve endlessly through the forest, the trees becoming increasingly dense and the sunlight filtering through in ever narrower beams. She checked her phone for GPS, but there was no signal. The map app showed only a blank screen. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She should have reached another town by now. She decided to turn back, retracing her route. But even the familiar bends and turns of the road seemed different now, the trees looking the same in their endless uniformity. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the road. Panic began to set in. She was lost. After what felt like hours of driving in circles, she finally recognized a familiar landmark, a peculiar twisted oak tree near a small bridge. Relief washed over her. She was close to Havenwood. She arrived back in town late that night, exhausted and disoriented. The familiar glow of the streetlights and the comforting silence of the small community were a welcome sight. She told Mrs. Gable about her experience, the endless roads and the lack of any other towns. Mrs. Gable listened with a kind smile, patting her hand reassuringly. Sometimes the woods can be a little confusing, dear. You probably just took a wrong turn. Amelia tried again a few days later, carefully following what she believed to be the main road out of Havenwood. This time, she paid close attention to every turn, every landmark. But the same thing happened. The road stretched on endlessly, the forest becoming a disorienting maze, her phone stubbornly refusing to find a signal. After hours of fruitless driving, she once again found herself inexplicably back on the familiar road leading into Havenwood. The realization began to dawn, slow and chilling, she couldn't leave. She tried different routes, at different times of day. She even attempted to walk, following the streams and paths that led out of town, hoping to reach the main highway she was sure must be nearby. But every path eventually looped back to Havenwood, as if the town existed within an invisible boundary she couldn't cross. The initial charm of Havenwood began to wear thin, replaced by a growing sense of unease and a subtle paranoia. The friendly smiles of the locals now seemed to hold a hint of something else, something unreadable. Their answers to her questions about the outside world were vague, their knowledge seemingly limited to Havenwood and its immediate surroundings. She asked Mr. Abernathy at the library if he had any maps of the region. He smiled gently and said, "Havenwood is all the map you need, dear." His words, meant to be comforting, sent a shiver down her spine. Daniel at the general store was equally unhelpful. When she asked about the nearest large town, he simply smiled and pointed towards the surrounding woods. "Everything you need is right here, Amelia." The close-knit community now felt suffocating. The tranquility had become a cage. Havenwood wasn't just remote, it was isolated in a way that defied logic. It wasn't on any map, and she couldn't leave. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Amelia's attempts to escape became more desperate, more frantic. She tried driving at night, hoping to lose her way out of the invisible boundary. She tried following the power lines, hoping they would lead to a larger network. But every effort ended the same way, back in the familiar streets of Havenwood. A subtle shift occurred within Amelia. Her dark hair, the way she tilted her head when she read, even the small, almost imperceptible nervous tick she had with her fingers, it all aligned. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He felt a strange mix of relief and terror. He had found her. Now what? He considered approaching her, telling her what he had found. But the thought of revealing that someone had been secretly watching her, documenting her life, felt incredibly intrusive and potentially dangerous. What if the observer was still out there? What if he was watching Ethan now? He decided to observe her for a while, just as the observer had done. He watched her finish her coffee, pack her bag, and leave the shop. He discreetly followed her, keeping a safe distance. She walked to a nearby apartment building and went inside. Now he knew where Subject 7 lived. The weight of the information was heavy. He still didn't know what to do with it. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The files on the USB drive played in his mind, the static videos, the unsettling audio, the detached observations. He kept thinking about the fear and paranoia Subject 7 had reportedly been experiencing. He made a decision. He had to warn her, somehow, without revealing the extent of his knowledge or putting her in more danger. The next morning, he printed out an anonymous note, warning her that someone might be watching her, that she should be careful. He didn't mention the USB drive or the specifics of what he had found. He folded the note and slipped it into her mailbox at the apartment building he had seen her enter. He felt a small sense of relief, but the unease lingered. He had done what he thought was right, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had only scratched the surface of something much larger and much darker. A few days later, he went back to Blackwood Forest, hoping to find some clue about who might have lost the USB drive. He retraced his steps, scanning the leaf litter. This time, he found something else. Partially hidden beneath a fallen log was a small, metallic object. It looked like a miniature camera. The lens pointed towards the area where he had found the USB drive. His blood ran cold. He hadn't just stumbled upon someone's lost files. He had found evidence of active surveillance. The observer hadn't just been documenting Subject 7, they had been watching the forest too, possibly watching him. He picked up the camera carefully, placing it in a plastic bag. He knew he couldn't ignore this anymore. This wasn't just creepy, it was potentially criminal. He went to the police. This time, he had more than just a USB drive with unsettling files. He had a surveillance camera found near the location where he discovered the drive. He explained his findings, the observation logs, the videos, the audio recordings, his anonymous note to the woman he believed was Subject 7. The police took him seriously. They launched an investigation, taking the USB drive and the camera as evidence. The town existed within a kind of bubble, anchored to the land by something ancient. To leave, one had to be released. Released by what? He didn't know. It was part of the mystery of Havenwood, a secret held by the land itself. Amelia looked around at the quaint town, the friendly faces, the peaceful surroundings. It was a prison, yes, but it was also a sanctuary. And perhaps, she thought, some prisons become home. She continued to live in Havenwood, no longer fighting to escape, but instead learning to understand its unique nature. She spent time in the library with Mr. Abernathy, delving deeper into the town's history. She helped Mrs. Gable at the bakery, the scent of warm bread a comforting constant. She walked with Daniel through the whispering pines, listening to the ancient secrets the forest seemed to hold. She never found Havenwood on a map, and she never found a way to leave. But in time, a strange kind of peace settled over her. She had sought tranquility, and she had found it, in a town that existed outside the boundaries of the world she once knew. Perhaps, she thought, some places are meant to be found, and some are meant to be home, even if they aren't on any map. The inability to leave had become an acceptance, the mystery of Havenwood a part of her own story. The whispering pines became her constant companions, and the timeless rhythm of the town, her own.